continue the board meeting. We're now on the consent agenda. There was one question that was just raised with regard to item 11, the M-Modal contractual agreement. Was that something that was to remain on the consent agenda, or were there any questions concerning that item?
There was a question. It was supposed to go into the discussion. The question was that we were clarifying whether or not there was an out for convenience or not. The answer is there is not an out for convenience, because in order to get the $7.3 billion in guaranteed savings over 5 years, they required the 5-year contract.
So the contract would only be able to be terminable for cause finance?
Yes. Now, with that said, we don't anticipate wanting or needing to switch during this time period, but...
This is for M-Care?
No, for M-Modal, the transfer,
okay.
yeah.
Item 11 on the agenda. So there was that question at the committee meeting last week.
But there was also I think we asked a question too about the upgrades. Were those included? Because and I think our bigger concern was technology is moving so fast that what happens if in 2 years this is just antiquated?
And they are included because what we're paying for the most part, is the software licensing. So as they upgrade, we get the latest and greatest.
Perfect. All right, are there any other questions relative to items on the consent agenda, items 5 through 15? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second. Motion is made and seconded. Any further discussion? Not all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda is approved. We now turn to the discussion agenda, item 16, millage rate and tax hearing.
Ken? Yeah, the financials are on the consent.
Yes.
So, I want to recognize Ken Warner. He's been doing this tax kind of analysis for the last 30 years. 35. You don't look a day over 20. I was 2. And he has decided to retire.
Oh, you did that.
And this is going to be his last tax exhibit that he has put together. So I just wanted to all thank him for his hard work and his service.
Family here?
You have anything to say?
No, just thanks. It's been a nice 30 years. Ready to find something else.
So I just wanted to read a brief statement of thanks to Mr. Warner. Certainly it's with mixed emotions that we say goodbye to someone after such a long tenure and 35 years. Ken started in 1986 with Broward Health as Assistant Director of Financial Planning and Third-Party Reimbursement. Then within 3 short years was elevated to the Director of Financial Management and has served in that role ever since. Needless to say, he's seen quite a bit of change at Broward Health over that time and has helped to mentor many other of our financial personnel, including 11 CFOs and 10 CEOs who he's worked with during that time. And he has, I think, 5 of your staff members have gone on to become CFOs at Broward Health, which is quite an achievement. So thank you for educating and training those folks. And I understand that you'll be passing the baton to Modesto Gatto, who joined us in July of 2016. So we look forward to working with him. But once again, tremendous thanks for many years of service and everything you've done for the district.
Thank you.
Wish you well.
Okay. So I'm requesting the Board of Commission to do 3 things here. Approve the 2018 rollback millage rate of 1.1774, the adoption of the proposed 2018 millage rate of 1.1774, and I'm also asking the setting of the date, time, and place for the first and second tax hearing. Purpose: the annual process requiring 2 public hearings and advertisement placement for review and subsequent approval of rollback millage rate and proposed millage rate for levying of taxes for fiscal year 18 and 19. Just to give you guys what we're trying to do here, we have not officially approve the fiscal year 18-19 budget. So what I'm doing is we have to send a trim notice out to the taxpayers. So by us going to the rollback rate, it doesn't go back on the trim notice as a tax increase. We can, once we set the rollback rate, we can't go up, we can only go down. So this is just a placeholder. In the current budget, I'm still waiting for some lip and dish calculations. And generally, it's been our practice to wait to the last possible second before we give our millage rate. I don't want to give away everything, but will be a significant decrease from the millage rate that we will be proposing to you in the budget. But things aren't final, and I don't want to announce that to the public what the exact decrease will be. But we expect to bring to you a significant decrease.
What does the phrase rolled back mean? Does that mean increase from last year? Or
Yeah, so the rollback rate, if you could, it gives it like an apples to apples. So basically, what would have been your taxes if the assessments didn't go up? So you're not really taking a tax increase, you're bringing down your overall taxes to the new assessments. So it brings it down so you don't get more money for the assessed value going up or down.
Yeah, it's the same tax dollars on a higher valued base, so it's a lower percentage rate.
But you're just not gonna take a tax on the growth, really.
That's great.
So 3% growth across the county on someone's property, you're not gonna take the tax, and that's what the rollback truly means. So you want us to vote on this. My expectation is that we're lowering it. I understand you don't wanna put that out there right now. If we vote on this now, are there other touch points where we can, even if you don't agree, push back on it and make it lower?
Yeah, we can always go down, we can't go up. So
I'm asking about the board. If the board approves
The
this
board
now,
sets the rate.
Yeah.
but so we have 2 times to set it, right?
Correct.
We have 2 opportunities. So this one, we're basically giving this one up. By doing this, we say, okay,
No.
that's it. So we'll still have 2 opportunities
You got it.
to look at.
This is just to get the trim notices out that this district is now having a tax increase, so go up as tax neutral on the trim notice.
The thing that says this is not a bill. Am I the only one that gets it?
You're the only one that reads it. I know. When that first non-bill goes out, it is the one time that the press really covers it too. We're missing an opportunity here to show that, and I would hope that at some point, because there is gonna be a cut, we are gonna reduce the tax, at least my vote is going to be that way. And I wanna make sure that the people of the county know that we're conscious of this and that we are trying to reduce, and we are working towards reducing every year that I'm on this board. We're going to try to reduce that tax rate to get down to, now, if we can get it dependent, I would love it. But I'm not, I understand that's the plan. But I do wanna see a reduction, so I'll wait. I'm happy to support this now. I wanna make sure we don't give up or forfeit our rights going forward this year.
I don't think there's any reason to presume that we won't get honest reporting from the press. So I don't see why we wouldn't have.
I didn't say that.
No, I'm being a little facetious, sorry, it's a joke, maybe only me. But I think the reality is we wanna cut it as much as we can. But we don't wanna be imprudent today, not knowing how deep we can go. So I don't see anything wrong with, this approach. I think it's the right approach regardless of what gets reported.
So in C, you say setting date and time. Do you have those dates and times?
Yeah, it's going, I don't set the date, you guys set the date, I would recommend a date. But what I would like to warn this committee, this board, is that once you have the first meeting, we have to have the second meeting. It's time specific. If we don't get it in a certain amount of time, we no longer get taxed. So, the days that you guys set today, we need firm commitments from all you guys that you guys are gonna be here and we're gonna have a quorum.
Have a repeat. Last year.
And so,
What is the minimum number of days between the 2 hearings? And when's the absolute last day we can have the second hearing so that we meet the county requirement?
10, it's 35 days, right?
question was, what's the minimum number of days between the two meetings? And when's the absolute last day we can have the second meeting? Because we have a couple of holidays in September that we're trying to fit this around.
Right, and the dates for those meetings are on page 4 of the exhibit.
I think it's within 15 days after the first.
Yeah.
We have, after the first meeting, if we have it on September 12th, within 15 days, we have to advertise what happened. We advertise what you did at the first meeting. The rate the same, did you lower it? And at that time, we also advertise our budget. Right now, the plan would be to have it probably about 10 days, or do the ad in between on a weekend. Once we put the ad in, the second meeting has to occur within like 3 days. So it fluctuates on the first meeting.
Can you come to the microphone? I'm sorry.
Okay. And the dates that we put together, we're trying to match the September board meeting, so it would be before the board meeting. That's why we came up with September 12th. Or if you guys want to set a different date, the board
September
says-
12th would be the first tax hearing.
would be the first
And
one.
when's the second tax hearing?
Would be September 26th, Wednesday, September 26th, which would be our board meeting, the day of our board meeting. So we would probably have a special board meeting, about 30 minutes prior to our board meeting with this, and then we would go to our board meeting. So I figured you guys would all be here, and that's why we came up with 12th and 26th.
So I would just note September 10th and 11th are Rosh Hashanah. So I don't know if anyone's planning to travel out of town for that holiday. This would be the day after the second day of Rosh Hashanah.
And then 19th is Yom Kippur.
19th is Yom Kippur, then the 26th is our board meeting. And I don't see any holidays around there other than Sukkot. So the only question would be the week of Sukkot is the 26th,
Yeah, the 26th.
24th.
That's okay, they were fine.
Well, as long as everyone's going to be in town the week of the 10th, that would be the only question I would have, is to make sure everyone envisions being in town and available for that first tax hearing on September 12th.
And we also have to work around other, tax authorities.
Right.
We can't schedule it.
We don't have a lot of options in the holidays, so we have very few days in order to do it around that time frame. So I don't know what.
I think when we looked at it, the 12th these days work for us. So this is the days that we thought that would work. Once again, you guys said it, this is just my recommendation to you guys.
But I can do the 12th and the 26th, I can do the 12th, the 3rd, I can do all week except for the 14th of September.
And of course, associated with the meetings are the appropriate notices that must go out. Yeah, but,
And Ken will be working with Patty as well as me and Mo, to make sure that this goes out perfectly. And we'll be working with Lynn just to make sure everything is perfect from a legal perspective.
Patty has already made sure it's on some of our calendars at least.
Right. I've been working with him and I have a list of the dates and he's given me everything. If we change the dates, though, we have to make sure they don't conflict with other meetings.
The calendar.
The
You have to look at that calendar, and make sure you don't have it on the same day.
Like, so us and Memorial can't have it on the same day.
The quorum would be the same though, right,
Yes.
4 commissioners. So in the event that somebody couldn't be here on one, but we had 4 here, one could be remotely. So, okay.
Yeah, the 2 days you can't have it is on the 13th, because the county's having their first tax hearing. And the 26th, or the 25th, you can't have it either, because that's when the county's having its second tax hearing. That's the only, you can't have it at the same time as the county.
So we're okay on the 12th and the 26th.
Yes, those are.
but we need to be absolutely sure that we can have that second meeting no later than the 27th. So, as long as we're confident we can properly notice it and have that meeting, and I think those dates seem to work.
I would move that we have the first tax hearing on September 12th.
Commissioner, there's some recommendations, we have to do 2 things first, so, if you don't mind.
Let me ask a question relative to the, under actions, project description on page 3.
Yep.
The last sentence references the higher rate to be adopted at the required public hearing. What does that make reference?
That means that we can't go above the millage rate. We can only go below.
The millage rate being 1.1774.
The rollback rate, we can't go, once we set the rollback rate, or whatever rate, we can only go lower, we can't go higher. Am I okay to make the recommendation?
Well, I'm wondering, I mean, this language, I'm sure has been utilized before, but it says higher rate, which, you know, to the uninformed person may indicate that we're actually increasing the rate, the tax rate, rather than a potential reduction, or that the rate that's been proposed is a higher rate than what was in effect the year prior.
No, Commissioner, I think what it's saying, I think it's statutory, and what it's saying is that if you adopt the millage rate now at the rollback, you can't go higher unless you send to every taxpayer by first-class mail a notice of what their taxes would be under the millage, and then if you wanted to increase it. So the higher means if you don't, you can't go higher once you set it.
I understand the purpose, but earlier in that same paragraph, it says the proposed rate cannot be subsequently adjusted upward in bold letters.
Unless.
Either of the two required public meetings, unless
Right.
taxpayer, blah, 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 sent a
Right.
notice under the higher rate to be adopted at the public hearing, so. You're saying that in this language?
The only way it can be adopted at a higher rate at the subsequent meeting is if every taxpayer will send the first class mail.
Okay, no, I understand the intent, I'm just wondering if this is the exact language we have to use, but.
I don't have it in front of me, but I do recall it is very similar to, if not identical to the statute. But I can confirm that tomorrow.
What is our current rate?
1.124. There's a schedule, if you look at the schedule. At the back of this right here. The current rate is 1.2483.
Because 1.124 is lower. Would be an indication. What, say the rate again?
1.24.
1.2483.
And do you have any dollar value to that reduction?
Yeah, the dollar, if we go to the rollback rate, it would be, $8.3 million.
Less,
Less.
right, than last year.
No, not less. It's 8.3 million that we would take, that we wouldn't be taking, if we stayed at the same rate. It's not less money, right? Because the values
If
have
we stayed
gone
at
up
the current rate, we would be entitled to 147. If we go back to rollback.
at the
rate-
current rate, but that would be an increase from last year.
Right, so.
So what you're doing is holding it flat, the dollar amount, right?
No, the dollar amount, from a nominal, yes, from a nominal perspective, yes, it's pretty much staying the same, within a few dollars of each other.
So the reduction, rollback rate we're putting there is assuming that the county assessment on property is going up, so we're lowering the rate so if we got $10 last year, we're gonna get $10 this year, this taxing rate will go, because appreciated value.
We know the base went up.
Right.
Yeah.
So we already know that it would be $8.3 million higher unless we roll back the millage rate to collect only roughly the same amount
Right,
like
so
last year.
All we're
All
doing
of
today
that
is
is
setting it so the actual dollar amount is the same as last year, with the intention that we're gonna lower it at the first, and second tax rate.
And once again, it's just, I'm still waiting for there's assumption in it, which is with the dish, they have not come out yet. So, in a case that they reduce it $50 million, I wanna just give some options, or give you guys options of what to do with the military. It's just a timing thing. This isn't what we intend to go at. This is just a timing issue, it's a placeholder.
Is this what we've done in the past?
This is what we've done every year.
So what is the request is that we adopt that recommendation?
Yeah, there's 3 recommendations. Do you want me to, read them all at the same time, or do you wanna approve them, separately?
Separately, please.
Therefore, the Board of Commissioners of the North Broward Hospital District should be appropriate to motion to determine the rollback millage rate for 2018 is 1.1744.
1.77.
774, yeah. That's just basically certifying that we agree with the rollback rate. This is what this motion is doing. That's the motion.
I would move that we accept the 2018 rollback millage rate of 1.1774.
Second.
As suggested by
Okay, there's a motion to adopt that rate, a motion's been seconded, is there further discussion on that motion?
Can I just say, like, it's to determine the rollback millage rate, we're determining that it's going to be 1.1774, and the next motion is going to be to propose it, so just as a point of clarification.
Okay. Is that clear on the record? Okay. So it's to determine the rollback millage rate for 2018. Any further discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, the second one is therefore based upon statutory requirements and the process criteria, the North Broward Health District sets the proposed millage rate for 2018 at 1.1774.
Okay, is there a motion?
I will move that we adopt the proposed 2018 millage rate of 1.1774.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded to set the proposed millage rate for 2018 at 1.1774. Is there any further discussion on that motion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Therefore, based upon the statutory requirement of requisite timelines, the North Broward Health District advises that the following dates, times, and places be used to hold the 2018 trim public hearings. First hearing, Wednesday, September 12th, 2018, at 5:30 p.m. at Broward Health Medical Center in the auditorium.
So moved.
And second and final hearing, Wednesday, September 26th, 2018, at 5:30 p.m. at Broward Health North in the conference center. Now, I just have one quick question, Lynn. Should we do this at Spectrum Building?
I don't know the answer to that. I know that we,
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
We did it here last year.
we did. I-
Second tax area.
So I'm gonna make that we do it at the Spectrum Building, at 5:30 p.m. instead of, yeah, or if you guys wanna do the board meeting at Broward Health North, would be your two options. It's up to you. If you wanna do it here, that's fine. If you wanna do it
I'm fine doing the board meeting at the Broward Health.
okay.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay, so then we'll, Broward Health North.
Okay. So we'll leave it at that. Okay, so the recommendation has been made, is there a motion to, so moved?
Second, but then let me ask a question. So the first tax hearing, Broward Health North,
Broward Health Medical Center.
Broward Health Medical Center, I bet at 5:30 on 9/12.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the regular board meeting and the second and final are both on the 26th?
Yeah.
And those are at Broward Health North?
That would be a Broward Health.
Okay, thank you.
So if you guys wanna do the board meeting before or after, that's up to you.
There, I imagine there's facilities for us there in terms of
Yeah.
microphones.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And I've been there for other events. Okay. The motion is made and seconded. Are there any further discussion on that motion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Alan. We now turn to item 17 on the agenda, which is the Broward Healthcare Facilities Contractual Agreement with Envision M-Care. I had actually asked that this be placed on the discussion agenda rather than the consent agenda, but since that time, I've had my questions resolved. So I don't know if we need a formal presentation, if there's no other questions relative to this item. If not, we can entertain a motion to approve it.
I have a question. Is there an out in this agreement?
There is an out, it's 100 and, I believe, 80 days.
For convenience?
For convenience, that's correct. I also, just as an update to the one case that we were talking about, I did find out that effective May 31st, that case was dismissed. And in case there was any further questions, Jillian Marcus, who's the head legal counsel to Envision, and Marla Sanfilippo, VP of Operations, were kind enough to come here and actually stay this long. So in case we had any other questions, they're also available.
At least they can stand up and say hello.
Thank you. All right,
So you need a motion?
Yes.
I'll read the motion. Therefore, it is requested that the Board of Commissioners of the North Broward Hospital District authorize the President CEO to enter into a contractual agreement with MCare Inc. and Phoenix Emergency Medicine of Broward LLC, the current vendor, for a 2-year term. And just as a reminder, clarification, the newly negotiated terms will bring an $8 million savings over the 2-year term to the health district.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Is there further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much, and thank you for that significant cost saving. Millions just seem to be piling up in terms of cost savings today, so it's a great thing. Let's keep that momentum going. And we look forward to working with MCare, and thank you for attending and staying this long in our meeting. Now, given the length of the meeting, I know that.
Can I just thank Kate Valdez Flores for pushing this one through and working with the vendor? There's over 1,900 attachments in Compliance 360 to make this happen. So,
As well as Tracy Burns, the legal,
Bruns.
I'm sorry, the lawyer that worked on it, she did a great job.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to ask, in consideration of the time, it is 6:20, and I believe Commissioner Neary, Vice Chairman Neary, cannot stay necessarily until the end of the meeting, since we do have additional items to discuss. I did want to suggest and move the board meeting date item to be considered next, so that Vice Chairman Neary can participate in that discussion. I know it's been an item that you've mentioned a couple of times, so why don't we take that item up next? Commissioner Neary, I know you mentioned this, I'll let you speak first to the item.
Well, I think just ultimately, I mean, I understand that people's schedules fluctuate, mine does as well. I just think that it's been very difficult when we put in stone the last Wednesday of every month, and then the Wednesday prior for board and then committee. I believe, in looking back at my calendar, we've only adhered to that once. And that's just very, very difficult when, you know, I mean, I'm probably not the busiest person on this board, I'm guessing, I don't know, but it's just very hard when we're constantly changing things. And what I'd really like to try to do is something that this board addressed, I don't know, probably 8 or 9 months ago, maybe longer, was getting a schedule in place, having a committee day and having a board day. Recognizing that there's special needs from time to time and that schedules can unfortunately fluctuate, but when we only have 5 people and 4 people are needed for a quorum, it just really, really becomes very difficult to carry on the businesses of this hospital system if we're just constantly functioning. So I just request that we stick to some plan, at least make it a more concerted effort to do so.
Okay, and I agree, and I think that there had been a schedule that was established, and the schedule has varied more than I think any of us would have liked. And as I referenced earlier, we even had to move the June board meetings to today, given lack of availability of a sufficient number of commissioners to have a quorum. So we need to get some dates on the calendar, stick to those dates. I agree completely that it's far more beneficial to have our committee meetings a week prior to the board meeting. Think of the committee time to consider the items, and then any board member who's not on a particular committee to become briefed on the item that before it's presented to the board. Under the new schedule that's been established, since I took over a couple months ago as the chair, is to provide the materials to each of the commissioners as much in advance of the meetings as possible. But at least a week prior to the meeting so that we each have time to review and consider the materials, unless it's a late item or an item that can't be provided that much in advance. We do have proposed dates in front of us. I think each of us has a calendar of proposed dates. I noticed that these dates have our board meetings on Thursdays rather than Wednesdays. I don't know if that creates material issues for anyone on here. We obviously need to worry about some of the dates as we get closer to Thanksgiving and Christmas time and the holidays. I think for that reason, I'm guessing that some of the proposed dates were set not at the end of the month.
Excuse me, what you have is this year from last summer,
That's from
yes,
last year.
summer, I just gave you what you have currently, and then I gave you a blank one so you can work it out.
Okay,
Here
my
at
mistake,
board.
okay.
I mean, what we had with this board, I realize there's some new folks here, but what this board had previously approved was the last Wednesday of every month being board and the Wednesday prior being committee day. If there's no objection, I would like to reaffirm this board's already previous, decision to have those be the days. And that's what I've worked my tail off to set my schedule to, so, that's my suggestion, my motion.
Sorry, did you make a motion?
I move that we basically reaffirm what this board's already approved once, and that's the last Wednesday of every month is our regular board meeting. I think we even stated that it would start at 5 o'clock. And that the Wednesday prior would be committee day, and as I recall, we had made the decision we were going to make every effort to leave all of Wednesday open on our schedules with the expectation that we would be establishing committee start times and so on, enough in advance that people can arrange their day, but there was also the premise that we would be looking to try to do committee day starting earlier in the morning and then have board meetings at 5 o'clock the following Wednesday. That's what we had previously discussed and decided and agreed to. I'm just moving that we reaffirm that same schedule.
Okay, is there a motion been made? Is there a second?
Second, I think it's to reaffirm, a second. So that's the discussion.
Okay, the motion made and seconded. Why don't we have some, obviously open the floor to discussion on the motion. Just ask everyone to recognize that some of those last Wednesday of the month dates conflict with holidays. So right off the bat, I think we need to make adjustments, unfortunately, or potentially make adjustments, such as December 26th, the day after Christmas, is the last Wednesday of the month. So as a general rule, I guess that's the proposal, subject to adjustment.
Yeah, we've always adjusted for holidays.
So I think there's two elements to me to the motion. One is to have the last Wednesday of the month as the standing date for the board meeting, and have the committee meetings the day prior to Wednesday, to have it on 1 week prior, on the prior Wednesday of the month. So last Wednesday would be board, the Wednesday prior would be committee. Okay, that's the motion on the table.
Just understanding that different folks have different issues and things can happen. We can set this in concrete all we want. And if 3 or 4 of us have an issue like we did in June, or, it was June, you end up having what we have today, is 2 board meetings back to back. So I understand some of us have other issues that we don't control. I have my own business, I can set my schedule pretty much around it. I don't think those of you that work in the judicial system have the ability to tell the judges when you'll be there. So that's nothing we can control, and at some point, just remember, whatever dates we set, we have to understand that there may need to be some flexibility, and if the flexibility works out, it works out. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
I always know at least 2 months in advance when I'm gonna have oral arguments, but the oral arguments are always on Wednesday or Thursday, both in Miami-Dade County at 3:30. So if we can be here, but I always let Patty know as soon as we get a notice of oral argument. And the judges will not, I've moved in the past for continuance based exactly on this, and it's been denied.
Yeah, that calls for the flexibility, I understand.
There's been tremendous flexibility.
like to
Not,
continue?
no, on everybody's part, not just mine, so I'm not suggesting that things would never change. I would just say to you that, I think there's been one time we've actually
Well,
fulfilled that
I
schedule.
think we're talking about tentatively setting the schedules, knowing that they may have to move, if we have to move them, and, let's sort of agree to try to make as many of them the last Wednesday of the month, and we'll see where we go. We're looking at a year, nobody knows where any of us are gonna be 6 months from now, or 9 months from now in terms of our schedules, so I think we can pretty much.
I just wanted to make it clear that it's not volitional,
No,
I'm not
I-
cavalierly not showing
I'm
up.
not suggesting such a thing if it remotely came across that way. That's not my intention. I would say that if, I know for me, if I've got it in my calendar, it would be very unusual that I would not work around that.
One thought for consideration is perhaps to have Tuesday and Tuesday reflective of Commissioner Gregoire's potential conflicts on Wednesdays on a consistent basis. I don't know if that's, and you said you had blocked out a lot of good dates in the future for Wednesdays. Is that something that we should give thought to with moving our meetings to Tuesday? Does that create any administrative issues?
September.
September creates problems. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Well, September 26th is a Wednesday, right? We're talking about setting that aside, that's our second tax hearing.
Right.
So that's a problem right there, that's gonna have to move. We have to have the board meeting on the tax hearing, are we?
Yeah. We are in the past. It's the second tax hearing that's.
Tax hearings is pretty quick, I think.
The second one is.
Yeah, it's really quick, yeah, it's just to read the motion, vote on it, move on.
So do we wanna amend it to Tuesdays? Let's, bigger fish to fry.
I'm less
Fine,
concerned
it's
with what day
Wednesday,
it
as
is.
long as you understand, I can turn up.
There's no shortage of understanding here, I'm just saying, I'd like to get something that we can more reasonably count on. That's all.
All right. Okay, no problem with that. So let's just leave it on Wednesdays and know that we might have to move it to Tuesdays if we have to, and let's move on. I think we got 5 or 6 more items to deal with.
Yeah.
Most of us have been here almost 12 hours.
All of us.
So,
Yes, it's-
Commissioner Gregoire,
most of
you'll
it in this
know
room.
well in advance.
Well in advance.
Okay. All right, so the motion on the table has been discussed, to have our board meetings, to set the board meetings as the last Wednesday of every month, with our board committee meetings to be the prior Wednesday. Any further discussion on that motion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I unfortunately, did not, in looking at the agenda before coming, I did not expect this to be a 4+ hour, meeting, so I unfortunately have to go. But, I know there's some things worked on that, I personally haven't even had a chance to read the entire RMO report anyway, because I had just gotten it on Tuesday when I was back in town, so.
Can you use the microphone, please?
Yes.
I'm just letting you know that I have to leave, unfortunately, so you still have a quorum.
Okay. All right, thank you, Commissioner.
Yes, Chairman.
Let's return to the agenda, item 17, item 18, request to approve up to $1 million in locums for position contracts. Gino?
Thank you. We put this on the discussion agenda because we wanted to be able to have a report that we can bring to the board. Behind tab 18 really just shows what we've used so far. This was up through yesterday. We used 15 days of locums coverage for ophthalmology at Broward Medical Center. You know, part of the reason is we had there was a little nuance in the law that had a certification issue with a couple of our ophthalmologists. One of them was Dr. Gector at North, the other was Dr. Berger at Medical Center, who has, I think he's here tonight, he's provided, I think, the last 11 years straight of consecutive call and provided stellar service to us. So first of all, we want to thank him for that, but secondarily, part of our action plan is to try to request an exemption to see if we could have him back on call for trauma. In the meantime, we are using locums and trying to source other additional ophthalmologists. We did procure some additional equipment that one ophthalmologist was looking to have available if she was going to take call. We did get that in, so medical center has a meeting with her next week. Outside of that, we are going to be adding ENT locums because we have a shortage of ENT physicians at medical center at present. That coverage will actually start this weekend. And so one of the other ones that we're working through right now is neurosurgery at North. The contract extension, because we've been extending, waiting at fair market value, is up the end of this month. They made a couple of demands. The rate we were able to satisfy through the fair market value just came back while we were sitting in this meeting. But now we have to get a contract through the works in 4 days, so we're gonna set a new record if we can do it. But nonetheless, the reason I'm asking for the ability to procure locums with a dollar amount is so that we have the ability, should we be in between board meetings, to go over the $250,000 approval that we have without having to go to the board. I wanted to have the approval ahead of time so that we didn't have to do something using an emergency procurement method that's over and above that. So that's what that is, and that's what this report would look like that I could bring to the board at their pleasure every month or whatever frequency you guys choose.
Okay, is there a discussion on the, well, I guess, is there a motion to approve that, that item? I know it's something that had been discussed at the committee meeting.
So moved.
Motion was made and seconded. Is there further discussion on that item? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Our motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did we approve their total, or is that still waiting?
Yes. Yes, that was item 11.
So you approve that, we approve that motion?
Yes, I know. Oh, you're asking me about the motion.
I know we
Yes, it
talked
was
about
on the consent agenda.
Everything on the consent agenda was approved. Out of that.
Oh, so it wasn't taken off.
We discussed it.
Okay. Okay, the next item was added to the agenda pursuant, again, to a committee discussion, which is consideration of a board liaison. There's no item in here. I think that the topic had been added based on some prior discussion concerning resources available to the board itself to assist us in our role as oversight of the hospital district. Would any commissioners like to speak to the topic?
I'm happy to take it off, since it's something I raised. I believe this board needs a full-time person to help us handle all of our documents, scheduling, minutes, everything we do. We need additional resources. There's a lot going on. I think the difficulty in not having a full-time person working with this board, the amount of stuff we have to do with it, I think is detrimental to our success as a board. I think additional resources, having somebody dedicated to us, someone who can store our documents, be a resource to the board, facilitate the scheduling of meetings and everything. I think at this point it's within our jurisdiction. We have the authority to do it, and I think it would be the right thing to do. And I think we have that person already here working with us, but my recommendation was to bring that individual under the auspices of the board. And that person, I theoretically could report to Chair of Human Resources, whoever it is. That happens to be me now, but whoever that person is could be in the future, could be responsible for managing that individual's schedule, timing, whatever needs to be done. And that individual will be coordinating with all of us, since we can't talk, we can never discuss anything, we can never talk about our schedules. But when information needs to flow, that person is the person that has to get it to us, ship it to us, whatever the case is. So, I think the primary responsibility of that individual is board minutes for committee meetings, is board meetings. These are deliberations of the board. There are deliberations. We have the responsibility to maintain them, to have them here for the future. So when all of us are long gone, all those documents will clearly reflect the actions we took or didn't take. And that was my purpose for recommending that we move the board liaison to be a direct report of the board, working for Broward Health with their own office and their own ability to get things done on behalf of the board.
I share the concern, although I view the issue a little bit differently. I think we certainly need to have a direct report, the board does, with regard to organization and preparation of minutes and follow-up on requests. Because right now, what I've seen is Patricia, who is our assistant, be taken away from us at times and put on other projects. And that, to me, is unacceptable because we need someone who's working with us on a full-time basis, who's accountable only to the board on a confidential basis. But I also see a need for a second person, which would be more in the nature of an advisor or a chief of staff to assist the board members in our research and coordination of items and communications with outside parties. We all act here on a voluntary basis. We all have very busy schedules. And, you know, we tie up days at a time relative to our board activities. And I think it would be tremendously helpful to have perhaps a junior attorney who would be able to work with us, and be able to coordinate events, be able to reach out to people, set up meetings, and inform us as to what is going on that we need to be aware of. Right now, we get certain information from the staff of the district, but no one is directly accountable to us. Well, aside from the 4 direct reports. I mean, obviously, the board has 4 direct reports. Those are all senior executives, and people who are very busy themselves. And they're obviously all torn in different directions at different times. But it's very difficult for us to get the information that we need, at least I feel that way. And to really clean up what needs to be cleaned up, we need to devote a lot of time and a lot of resources and be very organized in what we're doing. And to be able to have a full-time job and other responsibilities with family and other board memberships, and then also spend days and days here, whether we're here in person or remotely, is just a tremendous burden. So I think it makes sense for us to have someone who's working with us, and it would, to me, greatly enhance the efficiency of the board and the amount of work that we can get done. So that's my thought, is that we would designate an administrative assistant to be a direct report to the board. And we'd also authorize the hiring of essentially a chief of staff who could assist the board members in our various activities relative to our responsibilities. We all chair committees. We all have to obviously prepare for these meetings, review the materials, and there's, as we know, stacks and stacks of materials that we have, and it takes a tremendous amount of work. I think that would be very helpful to us. So one of our last meetings, there was some discussion, I think it was between Commissioner Wellens and the General Counsel, that the board has that authority to hire agents and hire resources. And I think it would make sense to have that be one person rather than us each going out and retaining our separate assistants or attorneys or whatever the case may be, unless that's needed. But I think that since we have that authority to do it, I think it makes sense for the board to utilize that authority. In a prior life, I had been what was called session counsel to the New York Public Service Commission. And my job there was to work with the chairman to organize every item that was coming before the commission, similar to what I envision happening here. So whatever the board was going to be considering, we'd go through the session council. We held meetings with the directors of the various agents, the various departments, gathered that information, made sure it was organized, everything was set, and it was very efficient and a structured process. And it's along those lines that I think that we can structure such a role here.
I don't have a problem per se in pursuing a chief of staff position. If, the board wants to put that on the agenda for the future, I think I'd be very careful about putting a chief of staff with legal responsibility. I think the charter and the bylaws are very clear that the legal decisions of this organization reside in the general counsel's office. The general counsel is the primary board director who has the absolute responsibility on legal issues and legal counsel. I will be very careful at even looking at that, but hiring a chief of staff type person down the road, somebody to coordinate with senior leadership, that's a different discussion, but I'd be very careful with messing with the legal aspect. I think that authority lies within the general counsel's office. But that's an issue that, if you want to put it on a future agenda, put it to a future agenda. But I think today we're here to talk about, the resource that I think, we need, and that's not certainly the same discussion, so.
Well, I'm certainly not talking about replacing a general counsel role. I mean, my agency had a general counsel and a session counsel, and I think we would have both those roles here. But it's very difficult to get information at the board level, in my experience. I'd like to hear from the other commissioners, just if you're going to kind of give your initial thoughts to these types of roles and responsibilities. Do you have any initial thoughts on what might be beneficial to you?
Well, I agree with the first. I agree we do need a board liaison. I think Patty is outstanding in helping us keep our calendars clear and scheduling, getting documents to us, but she's not our board, so I'd like to change that. On the legal counsel, I'm concerned also what kept going through my mind is, how is this person gonna be trained, and how is this person gonna be different than Lynn's office, and what would be the specific role of this person? And I'm not clear on that, and I guess that's what we would need to flesh out.
I don't disagree with either one of you. I like the idea of both. I would add to that, within the executive offices, you need a private suite. I am concerned about all of this stuff that I take home and made it very clear to Bev and everybody. I'd like something to stay here in a private, secure place. But I didn't we talked about board resources, so I think both of your topics are relevant to this conversation, should be discussed. I think maybe asking for an attorney isn't, I don't think you intended that to be a replacement or a supplement to the attorney we had. You're talking more about a person who's skilled and trained enough to be able to handle a public situation like this. I can't call you and ask you when to have, when can we have a meeting? Can we do this? It goes through intermediaries. This would be that same intermediary. You need somebody who is trained enough and understands the law enough that they don't start polling the board members. So it does have to be somebody that's got some level of sophistication and understanding of the law. So I understood your request to be that, not to take place or even to augment our general counsel. I don't have a problem with it. It would take time to develop the KSAs, the job description, screening hires. So I do think if we agree to it at this point, what we could do through the HR committee is develop all those things. What does that position look like? What do they do? And then come back to the next meeting. I think we can move on the Patty issue now. And I think we can take that position that you're talking about and see if we can develop that out. And then at the next meeting, through it, if the HR committee comes back and says, here's what we've developed, then we vote on that position as well. But it won't be something that happens overnight. This will take several months.
The training alone.
Even to get that person, and the training of that takes a little bit of while. So I don't have a problem with it. I just think that's much slower developing, but I'd like to move on whatever we're gonna do. We need to focus on, there's a lot of noise that goes on in Broward Health. I have 5 pages and 62 items of good things that we've done at the hospital level. And all I ever hear is the noise of all the BS that goes on between either the board and the executive group or whatever. I want that to go away. I want us to concentrate and focus on what we're doing good, what our physicians are doing, what our staff is doing, and get rid of the clutter. I think that I didn't give it a lot of thought yet because this is a new proposal. I had not heard that. I knew we were talking about the Patty issue, but I'm not opposed to it. I would just like to see what that means. What does that mean? What does that person really do? What's their job description look like?
And I think that, Commissioner made very good points that, we have to flesh this out. Obviously, proposing it for the first time, and I certainly have something in my mind, but I think that routing this through the HR committee is a good idea. That it be placed on the topic for an HR committee. and that we discuss what this position will look like, what type of person, what type of salary we might be willing to offer. And then if we're in agreement there, we come to a future board meeting, if that's the recommendation out of HR.
So can we make a motion, two things? One, that we would move the current resource to some line of supervision within the board. Who would be the appropriate, HR for the board?
It could be HR.
So that I would propose that position answer to HR, but I'm cautious about not having any responsibility of the executive team. There needs to be some, day-to-day, we're not there. Day-to-day, we don't see what's going on. We're not in that office day-to-day. Probably a little bit more than I needed to initially, but that's not gonna be a permanent thing. So we gotta be a little careful there, but I think that the private office, and really planning for a suite, 2 offices, somewhere in the executive area, is important. I want secure space. That's, my opinion. And I also want to be able to talk about what's going on in the organization, and not as if to get information. I ask everybody here knows. I will go to anybody and ask what's going on, what's happening, so that I can make better informed decisions on things that are appropriate to make. I don't need anybody to do that for me. I can handle it. But I do, even the minutes, every once in a while I'll see something in the minutes I just don't agree with, that I don't recall, and I don't want our folks getting hung up on that. So I'd like to move on the Patty issue, and also add to that we have the HR committee explore the development of what the, chief of staff would look like.
Well, I think that, we have an executive team among the board, being the secretary, treasurer, the vice chairman, and the chairman. To me, the direct reports should report to the executive team first and foremost. We have the most responsibilities, we have the most oversight responsibilities, the most coordination responsibilities. So to me, I think it would make sense to have the direct report to the executive team of the board.
Okay, are there any prohibitions against this?
It says operationally, you really want to have one point person who's the central person. And it could be you, since you are secretary treasurer, you're over minutes, and you're responsible for all notices. So there should be one direct, you're all, she's gonna answer just like we'll find it, answer to all of you. But it's operationally easier, I think, if they report to.
I have no objection to the board liaison, Patty, to report to the secretary who's responsible for noticing minutes, meetings and all that. I think you probably have the most direct contact with her, that role would, so I have no problem with that.
What would, what are we talking about in terms of being a direct report? Vacation time,
That's why you would want one person, so she wouldn't have to get all 5 signatures.
Well, that's actually gonna go on the PTO discussion. Is she part of that?
No.
You're not, so you still have to ask for time off, and you accrue it? Okay. Yeah, so.
So it should be one
But
person. for
why,
that.
so you're not in tier 1 or tier 2?
Was yours the motion? Did you make the motion?
Yes.
I second that motion.
So the motion would be to, could you restate the motion?
To have Patty responsible to the board, and it appears to the secretary treasurer,
And then,
because of notices and the key public issues we need. And second, to have the HR committee, look at creating my brain, it's been a long time, chief of
discuss
staff.
the
I'm
chief
just
of staff
bored.
position.
Yeah.
And also, did you want to say, that you want to secure?
Secure space.
Secure space.
I want a private office, when we come in there,
For the director.
for both positions when we get them, currently we only need one, within the executive suite.
But just to be clear, the secure space, each commissioner would have to have his or her own secure space.
Well, I mean, that the office itself, and then within that office, there should be lock drawers for you, for each commissioner, there should be.
If we
there
want,
could be one
if
file
every
cabinet.
commissioner wants, and I would like not to be traveling back and forth on planes carrying 50 pounds worth of documents. I'd like a place to store them someplace other than my home, because I don't think they should be stored in my home. That's my
I
opinion.
don't want to keep in my office.
Right, so I think that's, this individual will be responsible for maintaining that space for us, and a secure location, place where we could sit down and have a conversation, so if we need to, and pull our documents.
So by a wide, I would also add, by a wide 7-drawer lateral filing cabinet, so you can put all of our junk in each one.
So we will do our best to find a spot right now. Gino and I were just talking, we'll try to do our best to get her enough space so that you can, what we can't promise is gonna be in one location. It'll be on campus here, and we'll do our best to find her a spot.
All right, well, that extensive motion's been made.
And that motion is seconded.
And seconded. Is there further discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. So logistically, Secretary Treasurer Berry will work out how to get Patty assigned directly to the board oversight. All right, thank you.
So, we have the 2 add-on items.
Yes, the PTO item?
Which was first?
PTO.
Can I take it?
Yes, please.
So this is, we talked about this yesterday, and unfortunately, Commissioner Uri's not here. I really wanted him to hear it, because this bothers me, but I've articulated my position to Thad and to Gino, and particularly to Alan, and spoke about it at length with him. There's a difference of opinion between me and them as to what is right and what isn't, but I've been in a lot of companies. I've worked for the state. I've owned my own, I still own my own company, but I've also owned other companies. I was looking for Peter a couple of weeks ago, and he wasn't here. And I said, "Where's Peter?" And I was told on vacation. I know when I started, I tried to meet with him, and he was also on vacation at that point. And I said, "He's only been here 7 months. What is he doing?" And I was told that our executive team, which I believe is Tier 1 and Tier 2, right? So a bunch of those people out there are gonna like what I have to say. Tier 1 and Tier 2 now get unlimited PTO. There is a very minimal checks and balance. I asked how many companies in the country do this, and I was told about 5%. There's a Harvard study that talks about the merits of it. I'm gonna ask Alan to talk about it. But then I further asked, because I asked, what happened to the accrued PTO that they had? If all of a sudden in January or February, March, whenever it happened, people start getting unlimited time, what happened to all the accruals? Well, the accruals were paid out. That payout comes up to $5 million. It did not come to the board for approval. I wasn't on the board at the time. I find nothing, and I've asked, and it did not go to the board, and they did not believe it should go to the board. This is a public system that is losing money. If we were a for-profit company, I think our shareholders would have a problem with it. And in this case, because we're a public hospital, I think our shareholders, being the public, would have a problem with this. We aren't cash poor. We are operating poor. We're not making money. We're losing $140 million or so a year before taxes that supplement us, and I just think it's taking money from the taxpayers. So I've asked Alan to explain the logic and the rationale behind it. I can't seem to get past it personally. I don't think it's good policy. I further have a problem with the fact that we have 4 direct reports who, when you give them, instead of 20 hours or 20 days a year of PTO, you give them unlimited PTO. Whether they use it, abuse it or not, it is fundamentally changing their compensation plan without our knowledge when we're responsible for those people. So I have an issue with this. I want you all to hear Alan's explanation. And then from there, I think we need to think through some possible solutions, or maybe there are none. But I'd like to turn it over to Alan to explain what was done.
Thank you, Commissioner Berry. So I'm gonna explain this in, like I did yesterday, in kind of a 2-pronged approach. I'm gonna talk about the benefits, and then I'm gonna talk about why I didn't come to the board. Are you guys okay with that approach? Okay. So, when I left Jackson wrote me a check for $25,000 for PTO time that I didn't use while I was there. In my opinion, that I was from my personal perspective, it was great to get a $25,000 check. But from Jackson's perspective, that writing that check didn't provide any benefit to that organization, because I was no longer with the organization. So I ran the numbers when I got here, and then for the last 2 years, we had paid out over $700,000 of PLP payouts to people that had left the organization. The other issue is when we do annual merits that I'll bring to the to the board from a budget perspective, and if we give a 2.5% raise, okay, and someone's making $10, they're going to go to $12.50. If they had 500 hours in their bank, I would have to pay $2.50 for all those 500, and I'd have to take a hit to my financials. So when I ran the numbers, I projected that it would be an annual savings of $600,000 to $700,000 a year. So from a financial perspective, it was generating money to the bottom line. From a compliance perspective, nothing really has changed from really the process. The only thing that really has changed was that we don't have that the PL time carries over and it's unlimited. So you still have to ask your manager for a time off. It still needs to be approved, and we still track it. So the reason why I wanted to still track it was I wanted to see in a year if all of a sudden we were having 100,000 hours of vacation time, and now we have 200,000 hours of vacation time, and we would have to adjust the policy based off of the first year results. When I looked at the results 6 months in, we actually, and I just want to give a disclaimer because we talked about it at HR, I can only run PL time for the year through like prior year, for the whole year. So all I did was take the total amount of PL time for the year and divided it by 6, so I could do a 6-month comparison for this year. So last year 6 months and this year 6 months. It's just math. We're actually running significantly less in vacation time than we did when it wasn't unlimited. I'm assuming that as the holiday comes up, that'll kind of true up, and I think we'll be neutral on the whole thing. But that's what we did. Another issue that was going on in this organization are these phones. So you can ask every tier 1, tier 2 person, they're attached to their phone. The expectation is that they're on call 24/7. The old plan, in my opinion, was prior to phones, prior to beepers, prior to technology. People are attached, even when they don't want to. I'm sure each one of you guys are always attached to your work. And if you take a survey of our employees, I'm assuming that they would say that they're always attached because of the phone. So what was happening a lot of times, and I don't have documentation, but I've talked to a lot of people, is that they answered an email or they took a call when they were off. They felt like they didn't have to take PL time because they felt like they were working when they requested time off, so they were not putting in PL time. And so with all those kind of things, the Harvard study, Jackson, as I was leaving, transitioned this plan to their tier 1 or their version of tier 1 and tier 2 to unlimited PL as well. And they also made a payout as well to their employees. So that's why we did it. So now let's talk about why I didn't go to the board. We, as a team, in our operational team, our 18 meetings that we have every Monday, with Fed, Gino, Peter, and Lynn, we talked about it. I had asked the team, does it need to go to the board? Lynn had said no, because it's an operational policy change, it doesn't need to go to the board.
HR policy.
It's an HR, right, it's an, excuse me. So at that point, we decided, okay, it doesn't need to go to the board. From an
And that it was budgeted.
And yeah, and it was on the balance sheet as a liability, so it was budgeted. That is, the liability on the balance sheet is not our money, it's the employee's money. They've already earned that time, so it's a liability that eventually, like, when they leave the organization, like I talked about, I would have to pay out anyways. So we paid it out. From an optics perspective, this team had accrued some PL time that was already in our bank. I didn't feel like it was right for this organization, for this team, because we were so new and we were so green to the executive team. I didn't feel like it was right for me to take a payout. So me, Peter, Gino, and Beth just forgoed our payout because we just changed the policy, and I didn't like the optics of that, especially being a public entity and be supported by the taxpayers. So I didn't feel like that was necessary. The more seasoned people on the team that had been there 3 to 4 years, if I would have been in the 3 or 4, I probably would have taken the payout. It was significant money, and I don't fault anybody for that. But, that's what happened. There was no, there was nothing to hide, this was just, I didn't think it had to go to the board. I think that we've proven over the last year, that we bring as much things as possible to the board. I understand the importance of it, you know, now that we've had the conversations, you know, I will promise you, board, that there will be better judgment made in the future for future things, and I do apologize for that if you guys are, if it didn't come to the board. It was just a little confusion, and that's the truth.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Sure.
The benefit obviously is the financial savings, because in the future, if we keep this policy, there will be no further payouts.
Correct.
Okay, the detriment, am I not
No,
clear on that?
There's $35 million, there were $35 million accrued for PTO.
That's, I'm
Throughout
talking
the
about in the
organization.
future.
There were $35 million accrued. Only $5 million of it was paid out, only to tier 1 and tier 2. The other $30 million is still gonna be paid out.
And that's
for
the hourly worker, that's the hourly.
This only applies to tier 1 and tier 2, the executive team.
Right. But past time, I'm talking about if we keep this policy, from here on, we do not owe accrued time to tier 1.
To tier 1 and
To
tier
tier
2.
1 and tier 2, correct. Okay, so then the only detriment that I can see and the risk is that this unlimited time essentially is abused.
Yeah, and so here's my stance on it, right? We want people to take vacation. When people take vacation, we can find out what's going on in the organization. If you look at banking, they require their employees to take 4 weeks, two consecutive weeks off, so that they're refreshed, they're not making mistakes, and if there's anything going on that's you know, below belt, they can find it. I want my
Which is what Nick was saying.
Right, yeah, right. I want my employees to take a time off. It was becoming a forced savings account. It was becoming like their nest egg. It wasn't being used for the intention, in my opinion, that it was 30 years ago or 20 years ago when we put the plan. I would be not surprised if in the next 5 years, because of the technology and people working from home and all the stuff that's changing in this world, that this is gonna go from 5% to, I would assume, over 35 to 50%. I know attorneys, most of my attorney friends in New York, they have unlimited vacation time too. They just have billable hours. I think that's where it's going.
But what are the safeguards? Most attorneys have to bill hours and are paid on hours.
Performance.
So that's a
Job
safeguard.
performance. So if I take a month off and I don't get the stuff that I need to specific people, and I'm not balancing the books, and my job is faulting, then I'm going to be terminated because I'm not doing my job. If you talk to a lot of the staff, I've talked to a lot of them, and some of the cons of it is that people are a little overwhelmed with the unlimited time. They don't know what to do with it. They're like, oh, I have unlimited time, and then they feel like, oh, I don't want to take it. So we've been really working with managers to say, hey, you know, don't go out of control, but really, we stress that we want the employees that have the unlimited to take their time. I talk to my employees all the time. I expect a lot from my employees. I call them whenever I need to, and I'm always stressing to them, when's vacation, when are you taking vacation, I need you refreshed. That's just how I am. I don't know if it's just it's a more progressive view. If you're not getting your job done, you're not going to be employed. If you can get your job done in 10 hours, then that's good. It's work product, not timing.
And you keep records of
100,
the
yeah.
time.
So if you look, I've taken 104 hours this year. Gino's taken 40 hours. You know, Peter's taken 160 hours. The people, we're tracking it. You know, I have our secretaries do our time, put my time in, you know, and we stressed to everybody that they needed to track it. So really the only thing that has changed, in my opinion, besides taking it from 7.2 days or 8.2 or 10.2 or whatever as years of experience of days you accrue per pay period, it's unlimited, and then it's controlled from a manager perspective. And that's up to the managers. If the managers are approving time, and to me that's a reflection, if work isn't getting done under that manager because they let their people take the time off, that's gonna come up on the manager, and they're gonna look twice to approve the vacation time. Now, if you guys want me to reverse it, or you want me to change it, and because it didn't, I'm okay with it. I really think it's a cost savings to the organization, and I feel strongly about it. But obviously that's your choice. I'm indifferent. I actually would prefer it from a personal reason, because I don't take, I don't ever use the amount of time that they give. So when I'm no longer here, Broward would write me a check, or write Gino a check. And people that leave would write a check.
So the South Broward District policy, at first I was told the South Broward District does this as well, so I called them and asked if they did it. They said, no, they don't do it. What they do is, anything over 360 hours is paid out. So if you have 20 hours over 360, you can roll over 360, and then anything over that is paid out to kind of make up for that. I have a problem with the fact that $5 million, and if you look at our balance sheet, you look at our cash, $5 million is very hard to locate. It is a lot of money. And when I grew up in Detroit, it was a lot of money. Still a lot of money to me today. When $5 million disappears from this balance sheet, or from this cash flow analysis, you don't see it. It is small in the grand scheme of things. And I do not believe that the executive team made the right decision in not bringing it to the board. We have to decide on ad valorem taxes. So what we do is we look at the balance sheet, we look at the cash flow, we look at everything, and then we decide how much money we need to take from the taxpayers, right? When $5 million, we tax people $140 million. Everybody owns property here, you're all helping to pay the bill. We tax that money. You can say that it was accrued, but it was still cash in the bank. I don't see the $600,000 savings. I see if you had $5 million and you had a 3% increase in people's salary, you would have to add $150,000 to that accrual to make up for those increases in salaries. On the other end of that, though, you have the money in an account of some sort. You made $1.5 million. You could make $75,000 back. So you save $75,000 in my view, and get rid of $5 million in cash sitting in your account. That is my fundamental problem with it. I'm not sure that the board shares the concern with me. I have a concern that we have a fiduciary responsibility to taxpayers in the community, and we either neglected that, or it was slip past us.
So are you in favor of a program like memorials?
Had we done that at the time, but I asked for a list. I got a list of who was paid out. There were a couple of people that got $95,000 checks. There were 50 people who made more than the average person in Broward County makes a year. There were some huge payouts here. And these are people who are still with us. I did ask Peter for a list of, from that day, how much PTO is each person that got a payout check. How much have they taken? I haven't gotten it.
I sent it to you.
I did not see it. If you send it to me, I will look again. Everything should be in the file. I haven't seen it. I wanted to see how much time people took after that payout. So you've accrued pay, you've accrued PTO. You give them a check and say, here you go. The next day you can take a week off. Right?
Right.
The way this works.
The way it is now.
So to me, if only 5% of it, maybe it is the future. Maybe it is. Broward Health isn't the future in anything right now financially. Broward Health has a long way to go before we're fiscally stable enough to give money away. And I call it give away. I don't care that it was accrued. Giving money away. We are not a financially stable organization. In one of the finance committee reports today, every hospital we have and all of our others, every one of them loses money. And the taxpayers have to give us money every year to bail that loss out. I think we need to be responsible to the taxpayers who invested billions. I think 75 years, right? You said 85 earlier. Is it 75 years Broward Health has been around? 85? 80? The taxpayers have given money every year. In the last 10 years, if you look at 150 million, it's over $1 billion just in the last 10 years. Can you imagine how much money the taxpayers of this community have given for this place to operate? I don't think we've ever operated at a profit, right? The South Broward District being making $250 million. We lose 150. They made $250 million, and they have a more conservative plan. They have long-term employees who've been there forever. You look at their management team, they've been in place for a long time. We've had a lot of changes in our management team. I think the unlimited PTO is too rich. I agree with Alan. It appears right now that nobody's, collectively, they're not abusing it. I still have to see the detail of their individuals abusing it. But but I have a fundamental problem with paying out that money in March. In particular, changing a policy. We changed a significant policy. We accrued the money. It wasn't budgeted to be paid. We accrued it to pay as people left or as they used it. And that didn't happen. The team gave that money to the employees. And in what world, any of you who own your own business, how many of you would just do that? I mean, does anybody have an unlimited PTO policy? Doesn't look like it. You do? Well, because you're a billable hour guy. You don't bill, you don't get anything. These guys aren't billable hour types. And look, I mean, I think we have an amazing staff. I told you, I already saw everything that we've done. And in a different place, we would, if we were in a different place financially, I probably wouldn't hesitate or blink at something like this. We're not in a good place financially, and to me, we are acting like we are.
So just so I understand, you think it's only 100,000, you don't think when we pay somebody out, that's a hit?
It's already, yeah, you pay them out, it's accrued. Well, you accrued it, you're the one who just said it. You just paid out 5 million, so how are you?
Right, because what's happening is.
8 years to make that up.
Right, so what's happening is when somebody has accrued bank in their time and they keep carrying over and over, that means each year they're not using their time and I'm paying them more in productive hours. So I'm actually, let's say I'm paying them for 20, 80 hours, maybe in a year I'm paying them for 3,000 hours or 35 or 29. So I'm paying each year that they don't take their time and they work over their full time, I'm paying them more money than deserved. So and that's where I'm coming up with the 500,000 or 600,000.
Why can't you require that they take your time? You just said you were doing that.
You can't require them to take their time.
You can't require them to take vacation.
No.
Well, but you could allow them to accrue a certain number and.
Usually
pay out a
it's
certain,
balanced.
Right, but the problem with doing that is then people start to take time off, they bunch it up, and then at the same time, and then they're saying I need to take every Friday off for the next 8 months because I'm not accruing PL time, and that's not fair for me to accrue it.
So Jackson, you use Jackson as an example. Jackson got a new team in several years ago. Some of you were part of the team at one point. There's been a massive turnaround at Jackson. If they made that, I've heard they haven't implemented what they thought.
They 100% have. I was back for.
They've made that change, fine. They've had a massive turnaround. They went from just getting crushed to something else. We're under a CIA. We have issues all over the board, and this is what we do. I just don't think it was a good idea. I don't think it was good practice, and I want to find out what we can do to make it right. And I have an idea, but I wanted to hear what the other commissioners thought and how they felt about the whole issue. Commissioner Wallace?
So I had really 2 issues with it. First is the concept that it was accrued, so therefore it was budgeted. I think that's maybe technically correct, because it was in the budget, because it was accrued, but I think it's not correct when you think about the fact that we had a very long-standing policy where we accrued vacation on our balance sheet because we had to account for it, never intending to pay it out to employees that were still here. So when you take $5 million and you pay it out of an accrued liability for existing employees, not people that have left, because that was a long-standing policy, that should have triggered a discussion with the board as to a major change in our cash position and a major change in policy. So I said this the other day, and I'm sorry we have to go through this again because the board meeting is today. I have an issue with that. It was accrued, but it wasn't really budgeted for the purpose that it was used for. Okay, we can argue about that, but I feel strongly about that, and we can argue about it if it's not the issue. The second piece of it is, there's 2 parts to the PTO policy. There's a PTO policy that the senior staff chooses to make a change for 300 managers. That's well within purview of the senior leadership team. If you want to do it, if there's a significant cost to it, it should come to the board. That's an operational issue. When it comes to the 4 direct reports, changing their responsibilities as to when they need to show up to work, how many hours they need to work, how much vacation time they can take off. Some of these individuals are under a contractual obligation to the board of commissioners, and therefore making a change to their working responsibilities I believe is in the purview of the board. Commissioners. And those 4 individuals, or any future board individual who is a tier 1, should not be part of the rest of the leadership. Those individuals, if you want to change their responsibilities to show up to work for however many hours it is, that's the purview of the board. We manage them, they work for us. And those individuals, I think, actually should be excluded from this PTO policy, and the Board of Commissioners can decide if they want to allow the board reports to have unlimited vacation. I don't think it was within their responsibility to do that, because you have contractual obligations, Bev and Lynn, and eventually, hopefully, we're gonna have Nick and Nigel under a contract, because I think all 4 used to be under a very similar contract with a very similar sets of responsibilities. So, at the very least, the 4 individuals that direct reports should be pulled out of that policy, and they should be handled separately than what we ultimately decide to do for the organization. So those were the 2 issues that I had, and again, it would be like just arbitrarily changing salaries for the board reports because you changed everybody else's salaries. No, they respond to us, they're paid what this board has voted and chosen to pay them. So I think at the very least, we need to revisit that item. I probably in HR, or could be in finance, I don't know where you want to handle that, but those 4 individuals should be pulled out of that policy, and that policy should be decided by this board. What we can't, it's very difficult to undo what we've already done. We've already written the checks. But I think a bigger discussion is from a policy standpoint, what do we want this to be? And I think that's a staff, we expect to have some additional input from you, from the tier 2 and the rest of tier 1 employees. But we're not gonna certainly get involved in directly what to do with your reports, because those are not within our purview. So those are my 2 perspectives on it. Those are the 2 things I care about. I would have not chosen to do it the way that it was done. I would have certainly had a discussion with the HR committee and then with the regular board to make a change that affects 300 of our most senior management team, but that didn't happen. All we can do is go from here, and I think rectify the issues that can be rectified from this point forward.
Commissioner Broward?
Nothing for me.
All right, thank you. I have just a couple.
I actually would like to rectify the situation. I believe the board, and I'd like to make a motion that this board, after we're done with the ad valorem taxes and figure out what we're gonna be, reduce the ad valorem taxes by the amount of money that was paid out for the PTO. $4.9 million. I think we should give back to the taxpayers in addition to whatever we're gonna do for the ad valorem taxes. That would make me feel a lot better about what the taxpayers have covered or not covered. That is my motion.
I second that.
What is the amount?
I can give the exact amount.
What the exact, it's around $4.9 million, I believe, but you'll give us the exact amount. And I think that will, and I'm sure Alan wants me to shut up about it, that will shut me up at least for a little bit.
Can I just say something on this?
Absolutely.
I just want to clarify the intent so that everyone is clear, and you will not hear me contest a failure of communication, and I would hope that the board recognizes that there is going to be an abundance of correction on that, and we're going to do everything we can in terms of communicating. But I want to make sure that the intent was clear. I was at Jackson when this happened. I just spoke last week to the Chief Human Resources Officer there just to check up and see how it was going. The time taken off was almost identical after this plan was, and that's what a lot of the studies are saying. It is a progressive approach. CHI is rolling out unlimited PL. They have 108 hospitals. Tenet has a use it or lose it for the year. These are our competitors. Everyone does it. Let's be realistic. They don't do it to be an added perk and be competitive. They do it because it's a major cost savings initiative, and that's why we did it. So I just want to make sure our intent is clear. And we can change it, fix it, and whatever has to be done, but I wanted to at least get our intent so that there's no question there.
Yeah, and I'd like to speak to the issue. You know, there's a lot that's been discussed on this item. And obviously we discussed it at yesterday's HR as well, or was discussed at yesterday's HR committee meeting. First of all, I think that we're all in agreement that where there's a major change in policy, at the very least, it should come as an informational item to the board.
We
And I
apologize
think-
for that, and that was an oversight, and we will definitely seek board input from this day forward.
Right, and at the same time, I'm in agreement that where we have direct reports to the board, those are employees of the board. And as to those people, I'm in agreement that the board needs to have direct oversight of what they're being paid and how they're being paid and when they're taking vacation and when they're not. Right now, that's non-existent in any of those areas. It seems to be very loose in terms of the oversight, to say the least, and that's got to change. And that's a fault of the board. When contracts are auto-renewed without the board knowing, that's not necessarily a fault of the board, but it means that there's changes that need to take place. And it's just another thing that we're cleaning up, and unfortunately keeps someone across a lot that needs to be cleaned up. In my view, we're talking about management. We're talking about 300 management level personnel. Those are professionals. In my experience, professionals will perform. They have a duty to perform, they have job responsibilities, they will fulfill those responsibilities. I don't care if you're making $50,000 a year or 4 times that amount. If you're a professional, you're gonna perform at whatever level you need to perform your job responsibilities. And if someone's not, that person's not gonna remain long in the system. So, I think part of this is about whether, we need to limit how much time they take or not, really doesn't matter. As an attorney, there's no such thing as time off. Right? I mean, I take vacation, I'm on the phone, my attorneys take vacation, we're on the phone, the people who work for me. So we don't have a formal policy, but when people are out, they're at the beach for a week, they're still on conference calls, they're still getting work done when it needs to get done. When it doesn't need to get done, you take some time off. So I think that our management will operate in very much a similar way. I think one of the things that's perhaps getting buried here is that there was roughly $700,000 in annual cost associated with these payouts. That's my notes from yesterday reflect that. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
That the prior system was costing us $700,000 per year, and it was generally as people left the system. So on the way out, people were getting checks and no benefit to the system. So we're saying goodbye, here's $50,000.
It was actually bad for the system because they weren't taking time off and they were burnt out and may not be as effective and efficient as possible.
So there obviously, there's an amount that was, spent to pay these accruals off, but at the same time, there's an ongoing cost savings that has to be factored into here. To me, this is primarily an operational issue, and obviously we don't get involved in operations. The management team, the executive team, are responsible for the performance of their teams. And you hire and fire, you set the appropriate incentives, and from what I'm hearing, a lot of those incentives factored into this decision-making. That you want people to not be forced to take time off when it's inappropriate and inconvenient. You want them to be refreshed, be taking time off, and create the proper incentives for your workforce. And that's all a function of management oversight. We're looking to you for results. We want financial results, we want quality results, we want good legal advice. That's what we expect from our managers. How you handle the people under you is not our responsibility. We may want to know when there's a major change, and that's what we talked about a minute ago. But at the same time, how you do it is important, but that's really up to you guys to get that done and to manage your people and to make sure the results are there. So that being said, I think this all needs to be factored into this discussion, and we need to avoid an inclination to engage in, and obviously where we can't go is to engage in operations. So
I
that's,
think
my 2 cents on that.
I think Commissioner Berry has a motion on the floor that has to deal with a recapturing of that $5 million through a reduction in tax liability. I think that's a worthy effort. There's one more thing I'd like to add after we've voted on that, and that has to do with the 4 board reports. So I want to make a motion once because I think that motion was put up there, was seconded, there was discussion on that. If there's no more discussion, we should take it. Okay.
The
Commissioner,
firewall.
didn't we at HR say that you wanted us to come back to HR committee with a plan for the board reports? I thought that's what we had discussed.
No, I think that's for the management team.
No, for the 4 board reports, you had asked for us to revisit this in HR committee, and the they come back up.
I
If you
think
don't want that.
I think we might be able to just take the issue up here for the time being, but.
Well,
let's deal
there's
with
just
the
some
motion
things that
on
need
the
to be
table.
discussed, because now that you just have to, because then they don't have to pay it, so if they take, like, if you just say, okay, they're approving time, then like Lynn, for example, has no time, because there's no bank for her, so there's things that you may need to figure out, just putting through, kind of talking through it, if not, we could just.
Well, let's limit the
figure it out.
discussion to the motion on the table,
Yeah.
which is to reduce the amount of taxes actually collected by the amount of the payout that was made. Now,
And I would assume that we would see the
And I
opportunity
think-
cost of losing the $5 million, not of actually paying out the $5 million. So if I could put the $5 million and I would put it away into a stock account, then the opportunity cost that we lost would maybe be 4 or 5%, which is really what is the loss in the current year, in my opinion. It's not a $5 million hit to our bottom line, it was a $5 million to our cash position. And from a position perspective on the balance sheet, it didn't do anything because we had a liability already accrued. So if you're gonna go with that, then I would go with reduce it by the opportunity cost over 5 years, netting out the savings that we've had, which I think would almost be
I'm not amending my motion.
All right, so the motion is
Now,
on the table.
can I ask the question?
Please.
Thank you.
Commissioner Craigmore.
Okay, to make sure I understand, this $5 million that was paid out, had you not changed the policy, it would ultimately have had to be paid out anyway?
Correct.
So the change in the policy just triggered the payout, it didn't cause the payout?
Correct.
Well, the payout may not occur for years, depending on when that employee
Right,
decides to
but
leave.
the obligation was there.
The obligation
If they wanted to
was
take a
accrued.
month off, they didn't.
Well, hold on, they could have been paid out or they could use the time.
Right.
They could have gotten a check at the end, or they could have used the time. In any of the cases, that you said you've taken 13 days off, had you been paid out, that's what the 108 hours was saying. I believe, had you been paid out, you wouldn't, those hours would stop accruing. That would come off the bank. So when time is used, the bank gets reduced. You have $35 million in accruals for PTO, and when you use it, that goes down. At the same time, you're accruing it, so you're gaining it. So it's kind of mostly a wash unless it's disproportionate. You're taking more time. So I don't believe the answer to the question is no, that it didn't matter, that it was just a wash. It's not a wash. It's $5 million less in cash that Broward Health has today. That's my bottom line. $5
A portion
million
of which
less.
probably would have happened eventually anyway, but we don't know that.
We don't know.
But if someone had accrued 20 days of time off, could that person have taken 20 days in a row? I mean, is that theoretically, there was no limit, so if you had been here a number of years and you accrued weeks of vacation time,
Up to the manager's discretion, it's the same as that, nothing changed from the approving process, it still needed to be approved, the manager had discretion to say, nothing changed from that perspective.
but in looking at the finances of the last several years, what was the annual cost to the system in paying out the accrued time that was unused?
Conservatively, about $500,000 we paid out.
I guess my lack of comfort is, I agree with Commissioner Berry that a portion of this would not have ultimately been paid out. My concern is that we can't quantify what would have and what wouldn't have, and so taking the entire $4.9 million doesn't seem like an appropriate reaction to that, but I don't know how we would quantify it.
It wasn't approved by the board. I believe that it should have been approved by the board. And therefore, I keep with my motion. If the board doesn't want to vote for it, they don't have to vote for it. I believe that what was taken needs to be returned to the taxpayers, essentially, as a reduction in the ad valorem tax in the equal amount of what was taken.
But I understood from Commissioner Wellens that except for the direct reports, it's not something that we would have had to approve, that it's within their
No.
administrative,
The change in policy for,
overall for everyone.
right, was not something that probably was in our peer review. We should have been told about it, but the management team, the reports to Bev and her team, below Bev and her team, everybody that reports to them, are not somebody that we have the authority to manage.
Correct, so it would only been an informational item anyway.
Correct, but the movement of $5 million off the balance sheet to make payments is well beyond, because it was used for a purpose that it was not intended to be. The intent was, we have to accrue it by law, because that's been a long-standing policy, so that in the event that a employee decides to retire or leave, they either could take the time or get paid out a check. That's how the money got there. So what they did is they changed the policy and said, we're just gonna pay you cash even though you're still working here. So they didn't have an option of, those employees didn't have an option of saying, okay, I'm gonna take the next 45 days off.
So the policy could change, but the monetary aspect should have come.
I believe the monetary aspect should have come to us because it was well beyond the authority of the senior management team, and it was well beyond the authority, I believe it was well beyond their authority to change the purpose of those dollars. That money accrued, but when it was paid out as $5 million, that should have come to the board for approval. That's what I'm saying on that piece of it, okay? Now, with respect to the 4 board reports, that definitely should not have changed. I believe that's the direct authority of this board to set our expectations of their work responsibilities. You know, maybe that we decide to do it, that's fine. And maybe we decide not to do it, but it shouldn't have happened for them, and that's why my next motion will deal with that. So that's just my perspective on it.
But your motion is on the floor.
Yes.
Say it again.
My motion is that we reduce, after we're done with the ad valorem, we reduce an additional 4.9, whatever that number is, and I wanna get it. When we go to finalize our ad valorem, we reduce the ad valorem, the millage, enough to equal the $4.9 million.
Is that legal and within our purview?
You could always the tax hearing go lower than the millage rate, which is set.
It should be dealt with.
Correct.
I second.
I think the motion was already made and seconded, is
So now
correct?
it's vote.
Okay. Just one further thought on the motion. I like the intent of the motion, saying, all right, let's not collect from the taxpayers next year the amount of this, because it was paid out this year. But at the same time, there's cost savings and improvements that go along with that payout. And just today, we identified $7.8 million in savings, which eclipses the $4.9 million we're now talking about. So we're saving money here, we're saving money there, we're paying out money there in the interest of making this a more efficient system. And I think that by tying one thing to a tax reduction, we're setting bad precedent, because we're saying, well, anytime we do a certain expenditure, we may need to offset it by reducing the amount of taxes, which to me are two different things. We obviously all want to reduce the tax burden on our taxpayers, of whom we're several. But at the same time, I don't think it's a one-to-one correlation. I like the idea, but I think it's not necessarily the right precedent to be setting.
Just call the question.
I'm allowed to speak to the motion.
I know, so let's get to it.
Is there any further discussion on the motion? All right, I'll do a roll call. Commissioner Berry?
Yes.
Commissioner
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Commissioner Welles? The chair votes no, motion carries 3-1.
Okay, the next item is the IRO report, right? And I put it on, I'll take the lead, but I don't think I want to stay in the lead on it. I haven't had an opportunity to read it all. This report that we received last night or the night before last? Night before last? This is it's thick. It's, we all have lives. I've read as much of this as I can, and I have to take this as fact, end to end. I know there's a difference on how that is interpreted by the board. We do not have the time, in my opinion, to thoroughly deal with this in this meeting, but there are things in here that I know Bev, Alan, and Gino feel are right. I think there are things in here that they feel are incorrect. Things that are right, I think, are actionable things that you guys can deal with. You can take action for the things that you believe are right. There are things in this IRO report that say, this is up to the board. We think this. I mean, there was some innuendo that led us to some conclusions, but they weren't really conclusions. They're just kind of, you need to take this next step. So what I believe, I think we should talk about it a little bit, but I do think we need to, at the next board meeting, we need to know what actions you took to the areas that you believe were pertinent. What did you do? What were the consequences for the folks involved? And the board needs to engage somebody through our legal committee and legal counsel to look at the other issues that are left unsaid. There's issues in there that imply things that I'm not going to interpret. I want somebody else to tell me what they're talking about. And if there are issues with accuracy, I think somehow we need to deal with that too. We pay Baker Donaldson a lot of money, and from what I asked Alan for was some of the expenditures. I believe we've spent $4.3 million on them. I have to have faith that we've not wasted that $4.3 million. I don't think we have. I want to know what action we take on this. I want to know what we need to do to make sure that the things that he kind of puts back on us, how we're going to deal with it. We can't just ignore it. And if there are errors, I think, you know, the executive team needs to point those errors out to someone. So it's disturbing to read this. You guys know that. You all read it. Nobody liked reading this. But we need to do something about it. We can't just let it sit. And I thought if we let it sit till the next board meeting, that'd be a problem. I would like us to come up with some guidelines for the staff to take, and also potential of bringing somebody in to look at the issues that kind of remain unsaid.
On to me. This came to me as head of compliance and ethics, and it's quite clear why it did, because nearly every one of the issues pointed out in this document is a violation of the corporate integrity agreement policies and a violation of our internal controls. And the flavor of all of it seems to me that things got left for the last minute, and then in order to alleviate whatever crisis was looming, the controls went out the window and people did what they had to do. Not necessarily the goal was wrong, but the process was definitely wrong. And we're going to be responsible for everything that went wrong in this. And I understand that you feel that there are some inaccuracies in the report. We certainly need to hear from you on what those inaccuracies are. But at the end of the day, what happened here, there's no question that it violates everything that we've agreed that we will comply with. And that's very concerning.
Commissioner Wellens?
There are several items in here that I have a serious problem with. I have a serious problem with the fact that my name is in here on 2 of the items because of questions I had, calls that I made, requests that I made that were not, let's just say they weren't, the requests were not fulfilled. The facts that I was told didn't turn out to be as accurate as they were told to me. I'll leave it at that. I'm disappointed. I've got serious concerns about our ability in the HR department at Broward Health. I have serious concerns about what happened there, the way vendors were engaged, the way documents were produced. The answers that I got when I asked questions that didn't turn out to be correct. I had calls, I had meetings, I had notes of things that were told to me on the phone, in conference calls, in meetings. That's just not the way this should work. We put a lot of trust in the senior leadership team here, and we have to trust that you're gonna do your job to the best of your abilities. But when we ask for questions, when I ask for information, I expect to be given that information. And when I didn't get the information, and then when I was told answers, and then the IRO does an interview of people and documents, it turns out that there's problems there, and they go back to the things that we talked about today about the issues of compliance, I think are a major flaw. I still think we have a big problem with focus arrangements, with our contracting process, the way that we engage vendors, the way that things are done at the last minute, when things are done when the board is not made aware of significant changes. So I think we need to spend some serious time solving these problems. And I think that is a priority. I don't think we can ignore this. I think we have some potential litigation from this. It should never have occurred. And this organization should really look at this and say, how did we get here 3 years into a CIA? I think that's the way we should approach this, is how did we get here and how do we get to where we want to be? We are a long way from where we want to be. And most of the issues that and they only looked at one area here, had to do with a lot of the stuff that came out of the HR area. So I had very serious concerns there, and not everybody is at fault, but there's a lot of fault to go around in this organization. And we collectively need to do a better job. So I'll leave it at that for right now until we want to get further into this and have a chance to digest the whole document.
Well, I agree that this was just presented to us in the last 48 hours or so. And there's a lot here to digest. There's obviously the report and then hundreds of pages of attachments that go along with it. To me, I have concerns over the report. I mean, having been an attorney for 25 years, I do litigation, I do contracts, I work for the government, I do regulatory work. This, to me, I have concerns over being less of a report and more of an advocacy piece. And I think that that's the way I look at this when I read this. I don't see it as a necessarily neutral report. And I think part of that may reflect what Commissioner Barry referenced earlier in a different context, completely different context, the expression called GIGO. So if I'm not sure that the IRO got all the information an IRO maybe should have gotten in order to prepare a report like this. Whether there was a set of specific information that was provided to him, or whether the IRO had all information that he needed. To me, there are a lot of problems still in this system, as I referenced day after day of our meetings. We're cleaning them up as we find them. But to identify one or two or three things and say, the world is ending, and the systems that existed years ago, which were horrible, still exist, is inaccurate. And I don't accept that as a conclusion. And particularly since we know there's a lot of other things that need to be cleaned up. We talked earlier today about thousands of contracts being entered into by this system. We talked specifically about focusing on focus arrangements, which are our highest priority, and ensuring that focus arrangements are entered into Compliance 360. And during that discussion, it became clear, as we knew it would be, that not all of our contracts, as we see here today, are in Compliance 360. But yet, one example of a contract that's not in Compliance 360 is taken and run with as if, oh my God, it's the end-all be-all. So to me, I have concerns over the scope and the targeting and what information was provided and what results may not be surprising based on what was provided. Clearly, we need process improvements. We need to take this back and look at this and see what needs to be done. One of the fundamental concerns that I have is why the board did not hear about these things. We have a chief compliance officer, we have a general counsel, we have an executive team, but we have legal counsel and we have a compliance officer who are charged with compliance and legality. And if these things are coming to us from an outside entity rather than directly, that to me is a grave concern. So if these things have been out there for months and we didn't hear about them, and we hear about them from a third party, that is very disconcerting to me. So that is one of the things that I think we need to look at as a board. When we talk about information being presented to the board and making sure that we're getting information from those, particularly those who are direct reports of ours, let's make sure we're getting all the information we should be getting in all areas. Not just saying, well, let's make sure we get this policy change, but let's not get this, potential compliance issue. So, with that, I think we need to all digest this further, look at all the documents that are here, but be critical in our thinking about how this was approached and what's in here. And I think in the meantime, preserve all information that was provided to the IRO, including all emails and texts and other communications, so that we can, if necessary, do a full investigation.
I just
And I make that as a formal request to anyone involved with this matter.
I would
This come back before us, will this be on us?
I hope so.
Yes.
I would just suggest that several of these items have been known for a long time, for several months. We've been talking about them for several months. they've been coming to the board at least back into April, May, several of the items that I'm referencing, so we knew there was a problem there because we discussed it. We had conference calls, it came to the HR meeting, it came to the board meeting. It didn't come out of left field. It's been there for several months.
So let's just talk, we as a board have to take some action. If you look at the last page, it was copied to Laura Ellis, who's the federal monitor. I think allowing the executive team to take the actions that they can take based on this, within the next 30 days, and before the next board meeting, they should come back with a report. Here's what we did about these issues. Here's the issues we don't agree with, but then there are parts of this that just leave out, especially in the footnotes, if you read them. I'll leave the board to do this, I'll leave the board to do this. I believe the best way to deal with this is one, let the executive team do this. Two, through outside counsel, that is partly selected through general counsel's office, through your committee. Look into these issues, and we may need to enumerate for them, which ones we want them to look into. The issues where they say the board should look at this, I don't think any of us are investigators that are gonna go and do this. We need to have somebody do this for us. There are some things that are laid out here that almost say to me, I mean, they're almost saying to me, and the only reason I'm upset, I wanted the IRO to say, here's exactly what happened, so we could just deal with it and get this behind us. It doesn't say that, it kind of leaves some stuff for us to try to figure out. So I think we should have an independent, third-party group look at these issues, not look at the IRO report. I wanna make sure I'm really clear. I don't have a lot of heartburn with the report, but again, I'm reading it, I'm relatively new to the board. I'm reading it as factual, and I do think a lot of it is factual. You guys have just as much said it is, and if they are, they need to be dealt with. Some people are not gonna be around that are involved in this. At least they wouldn't be if I were sitting in the big seat. But we have to look at these other issues. We have to look at whether or not there are issues deeper in here that are being referenced and deal with them, because I am sure that the federal monitor is gonna say, how did you deal with this? I am positive, whether we like it or not, whether, Commissioner, you agree with it or not, the federal monitor is gonna say, this is serious. The federal monitor helped select, I believe, Baker Dodson, right? Well, I think they're approved by them. They
They were approved by them, they didn't select them.
well, we selected them and they approved. Al
We have to
Sinati signed the
approve them
contract.
And give a certificate of independence,
Okay.
their expertise.
Yeah, and the
then-
certificate of independence is attached. So, but that's the thing, so the monitor's gonna ask us, we have to take action. I'm proposing that we allow the executive team to do what they can do, and then we have to hire outside counsel, through your committee, with general counsel, to look at the other issues within this. If there are any other things that we need to add, let me know what we need to do. I've heard from a couple people that don't agree with it, I'm gonna do some of the pieces of this, some dates may not be right or wrong. I don't know, the meat of this is a problem, and I do think what happened is some people got ahead of themselves, and then went back and tried to clean it up. Not supposed to get ahead of yourself, not at the levels of the folks that we have. There's some people here that are supposed to be the sophisticated A-team executives that made some mistakes here. And getting in front of yourself in a situation like this is lethal.
But again, we need to get to the facts. I think we all acknowledge that there's some question as to whether some of the underlying assumptions and facts that went into the report are accurate. And from what I've heard, right off the bat, some of them are not. So that's question number one, is what is accurate and what's not in terms of the factual underpinnings. Because without a factual underpinning, you can't have a logical conclusion. So I agree we need to take significant action, because the monitor is going to ask us, well, what did the board do? We have a duty of oversight here. And we have a significant responsibility, a duty of care. And we need to fulfill that. And I think we need to fulfill that with increasing independence. And along those lines, I think we should hire independent legal counsel, as has been suggested. Perhaps through the auspices of the chairman of the legal committee, Commissioner Gregoire. And ask, with that person's assistance, take a look at this, take a look at what was done here, what the process was, what the information is, and help us get to the bottom of it.
Once we revisit that issue.
Yes, so I think the preliminary, yes. Yeah, I think this is preliminary. I don't think that we have any action item today.
Can
Unless someone
the
feels that-
executive team in the next couple of weeks remove remove or deal with the sections that can be dealt with. Do you follow what I'm asking, Bev?
Yes, I am.
So then that would leave a portion of the report that says, here's the rest of it. Either you don't agree or it needs to be looked at. But the areas that you agree with and you looked at and you validate, verified, you tell us what action you're gonna take on those. And then what's left is what you will have to determine what we ask the outside counsel to do and what we don't think needs taking further action.
Some of these are a fait accompli, and so all you can do is correct the process going forward.
Executive team can correct the process.
Right, exactly. Some of these are pending and need to be addressed, for instance, Gallagher, and that's, I think there's only one correction for that, and that's Dave Gallagher. But that decision has to be made by all of us, because you saw the substantial amount of work Gallagher did, and there's documentation here that I would have relied on to go forward. And then a few of these, are more problematic. Sorry.
Thank you.
And then a few of these are more problematic, and those are the ones that we're gonna have to.
And that's why I think the executive team can, and we'll review what the executive team does. If we think they left something out, that's what we're here for. We're checking balance between each other. Let's allow them to do their job, come back to us. If you can do that in the next couple of weeks, and then turn it over to your committee to then take care of the gaps. Whatever the issues are,
Right.
I think would be the best way to resolve it. I don't think we need a motion, or do we, Chairman? Do we need a motion for this, or I believe that by the next board meeting, we need to have it laid out.
The plan.
Here's our response, here's what we did. If there's disagreement somewhere, here's the disagreement. We don't believe that to be accurate, whatever. And I think from my conversations with the executive team, they've already taken a lot of the actions that I think I would expect. It's not in writing, I wanna see it, I wanna be able to put it there so that Laura Ellis can get a copy and say, okay, they dealt with this.
I think that's a great idea. I don't believe we need a motion to that effect. I think it's a request that the executive team would agree to. Give us your version of it, your opinion on this. And then we can parse out the wheat from the chaff and say, okay, what remains and how do we deal with that?
I'm not just asking for an opinion. I am asking for what they did. What are the consequences for the parties that were involved in the parts you agree were inappropriate? If you saw something in here that you agree with, that needs to have a consequence, you need to take that consequence and tell us. I'm not gonna tell you what to do. It's progressive discipline, I would assume. There are certain things that I'm sure are termination immediately. There are other things that there should be corrective action plans on. Whatever your policies, however you normally handle somebody in these situations, which this is not normal, you need to do and show us what you did so that we can respond to the monitor. I believe this is to the board, right? Yes. I mean, it's actually you, Nancy.
Yes.
So Nancy.
That was a happy moment.
Nancy is gonna need to respond to this with the board. And so Nancy, I'll leave it to you.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt? I'm sorry. So the way the reports are, so the general counsel's office is going to be looking at the report right now to determine if there are any reportable events. So we're not gonna wait 30 days, 60 days
Good.
until the board convenes. So I will be doing that, which is what I do with every report. So if there are issues, I will be investigating that now.
And does the executive team get those as well?
If there are reportable event, yes,
They
they will
will
come
get
here.
them.
So
What is
just
the
to be
initiating
clear,
factor?
that is not gonna wait 30, 60 days.
I think we should do this as quickly as possible.
So I will be doing that, and I've already begun an action plan to determine whether or not with outside counsel, there are reportable events.
And
We
Mr.
need
Basso.
to be very proactive.
Correct.
And we will start immediately, we already have, a lot of it's already been corrected. So we will not also wait 30, 60 days, we're on it already. We just need a little time, we just received it a couple days ago, so, we're on it.
I just want a resolution by the next one. I don't want this to drag on.
And neither do I.
We need it done.
We're on it.
Absolutely. When there's a possible reportable event, what is the process? Is Nick still here? And what is the process when you get an inkling or a report that there's a potential reportable event? As chief compliance officer, what's the process?
Well, it would depend on what the reportable event is. Since there's several categories, but if we're looking at violation of laws.
You've read this.
Anything like that, yes, I have.
So So what's a
Yeah.
reportable event in here?
I haven't made that determination yet.
There are.
Just like everyone else, I think we're still digesting the report.
But you do believe there are reportable events in here?
No, I wouldn't say that at this point.
Okay.
I mean, I just don't know yet.
So the
I mean,
legal
you
aspect
go
goes to
through it.
legal. So if there are
Right.
violations of law, rule, regulation that result in civil, criminal, administrative, that
Yes,
goes right
it
to me.
goes-
So I'm already reviewing it with council to see if there are any reportable events. Nick does the other reportable events.
Yeah, and that's according to our policies and procedures that we have. Is it anything that where there's a probable violation, it goes to the general counsel's office to review.
And do we have the opportunity to receive information from the outside counsel relevant respect to their determinations?
You will if there's a reportable event, and it'll go through, general counsel and, chief compliance officer, as our process has always been.
And what if there are other contracts that were entered into that were not put into 360? How do those get reported to you?
It would be as we discover them.
And then that would be investigated similarly through you or through general counsel?
Violation of law, rule, or regulation would come to me. Other would go to process, and policy would go to Nick.
So you said we would only get something if there were reportable events. What if there's other?
Oh, absolutely,
issues?
we would report it, but the question was, can we speak to outside counsel about a reportable event? So the process that we've developed and refined is we would be briefing you, as we do every month, on progress of issues. And we'd be telling you, we think there might be, this is where it goes. If it is a reportable event, you would know, we would come to a public meeting, we would advise the board, or if there were other issues that we found as a result of looking for potential violations of law, rule, regulation.
Which we've done for previous reportable
All
events.
previous reportable events that involve the law.
Well, you would
I
find.
think we've discussed them all in the compliance committee.
We do, and then then there, possibly, Nancy would talk about them at board.
But Nick, you would find, if there were other contracts or engagements that weren't in compliance 360, those issues should bubble up through the accounts payable side.
They should, yes.
When when an invoice comes in, and you go to match it against the contract, and there's no contract in compliance, that's the safeguard that Alan put in. So that's how you're gonna catch a lot of these things that are still out there, right? Is that right?
Correct.
So that's one way that we would find those is if there's a demand for payment, there's no contract.
Right. Then the process is put in place, AP shouldn't make a payment.
And I think, so.
Which is what happened with Gallagher.
Actually, Gallagher refused to sign the contract.
But
Right, there's no
Gallagher sent a
contract
demand
and there's
letter.
a demand for payment.
Yeah, they sent invoices and then they sent, at least what it says in here is they sent invoices and they sent a demand letter, which is in there, right? So I read the demand letter, which I guess went to the general counsel's office.
But here's where you get into and I don't want to get into the meat of the report, as I said, but, at the last board meeting, when we talked about the Gallagher contract, Peter had told you that no demand or no work had been done and nothing was authorized to be paid. If you read this report, there's a section in there that talks about him knowing that 4 or 5 days before, that they were going to bill us 4 or 5 days before the meeting. And that's why we needed to let the executive team deal with it, see if that's accurate and true, and then do what they need to do. I have faith that they'll make the right decision and do what they have to do there. If in fact those things that are blatant like that, if that in fact is true, and you were not told the truth, there needs to be consequences.
And this is the no work that was done. So clearly, work was done.
I agree, Commissioner Berry. I mean, we need to get to the bottom of this, and that's, whenever anything like this comes up, or you bring something to our attention, we need to take it seriously. We need to make sure that we get the right facts, and we get the right result, and we fix everything as we go along. Obviously, if there's something that needs to be reported, we report it. I don't think there's anything further. I think we've covered this item. It's, all right, with that being the case, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Comments?
I think we've had enough comments today. Unless anybody else wants to speak, I don't. Other than I wish everybody a wonderful.
I just want to say Broward Health North has some of the best food. Their salmon is better than any restaurant we've been in.
Motion to adjourn. Aye.
So,
Aye.